All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our 11th Hops and Harvest dinner. We've got Border X for this delicious dinner pairing tonight. I'm Lindsey with MIHO Catering, and I am joined by Paige from the San Diego Brewers Guild, Carmine from MIHO Catering, Executive Sous Chef, and then David from Border X. Just wanted to say thank you all for participating in this dinner, and this is at the tail end of our series. We only have one more on April 1st with AleSmith, so last chance. We had a very successful dinner this time with Border X. We've got over 65 people 65 dinners, so that's what, 130 people participating. This beer dinner has just been so great to really feel connected to our community and really give you guys at home and ourselves too something to do during these uncertain times. So we really appreciate your support. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Paige for all of her hard work working with the city and pushing through with Nathan Fletcher to get breweries. Paige, you could probably speak on this a little bit more better than I can, but so we can actually go into breweries and drink beer without ordering food. Paige did that. Paige has been working so hard to make that happen.
I was an element of that. There are a lot of people working on it, but we work directly with our county board of supervisors and starting in January. And as a result, just last week, the governor removed the meal requirement for tasting rooms. So winery, brewery, and distillery tasting rooms no longer have the meal requirement for guests to visit them, which I think that restriction will help some of our members here locally, our breweries in particular, provide an experience that they haven't been able to provide in a year. So thank you for the shout out.
Welcome. Woman of one or team of one.
Team of one. So yeah, the San Diego Brewers Guild, we've been around since 1997 as a nonprofit trade association, and we support the craft breweries in San Diego County. So what happened last week was part of our advocacy efforts and our partnership with the California Craft Brewers Association, which is the statewide association who does a lot of advocacy up in Sacramento at the Capitol. But we have about 125 brewing companies and brands as members that span close to 180 locations throughout the whole county. So we represent and promote, market, advocate for a lot of small businesses here in the county and try to support them as best as we can with the amount of resources and tools and relationships that we've been able to develop with cities and the board of supervisors and other stakeholders in the region. So Border X is a member of ours, and so we I don't know if we wanted to kind of go into Border X and talk about who you are, when you started, just give people a history and intro into the company. Oh, you're muted.
Of course, I'd love to. So my name is David Favela. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Border X Brewing. We started 7 years ago, just kind of as a way of bringing our family together. My brother, my two nephews, and we made beer that we thought we would like. And being Latinos, we decided to make Mexican-inspired craft beer, and that's no different than being Belgian and making Belgian-inspired craft beer. You use the ingredients and the traditions and the things that you're familiar with to influence your decision-making on recipes and the kinds of beers we want to make. And the first beer we made was a blood Saison, which is inspired by agua de Jamaica, which is a hibiscus tea, if you will. And it was incredible. I remember tasting that beer, and at that moment I said, we are not going to make any other beers than the ones that we want to make for ourselves. So for the first 2 years, we didn't even make an IPA, kind of forced us into different styles. We did an Horchata Golden Stout, an Abuelita's Chocolate Stout, We do have an IPA on tap now, but I think that's because we finally have, developed our palate to a degree where, we're not following trends necessarily. We're trying to create our own by just being true to ourselves. And it kind of puts us out there in left field, but that's where we're comfortable. And so far, so good. For being as small as we are, we've made a lot of noise and have garnered a lot of attention. And we're proud of what we've accomplished so far. And the great thing is that we still are true to our original cause. It's really about family. And when we think of family, it's in the inclusive sense that our customers are part of that family. And we pride ourselves on great customer service and tradition. And by the way, we have expanded to LA. That was 2 years ago. Doesn't feel like it. We were shut down one of those 2 years. So kind of disappeared. But in October, being the optimist that we always are, we decided to invest in Mujeres Brew House, which was built off of the fact that we had a brewery that had 60% female followers. And I think the reason that we attract a diverse crowd is we do beer, of course, but we have food, we have art, we have events. We really do kind of have a cultural element, a community element that I think has really diversified our customer profile. And that was one of the reasons we went to do Mujeres Brew House. Is we said, well, what if we did something that was really run by women, exploring the kinds of beers that they would make unimpeded, right? Uninfluenced, and just whatever it is that they like, and it could be they're going to like a milkshake IPA, or it could be they want fruited sours, or they might want something else. We don't know. So that's really an experiment in progress. And I'd say now that we've been open for a few months, it's gone very, very well, and we've garnered an incredible amount of support. So we're very excited. We're hoping 2021 is going to be really a much better year than 2020.
Fingers crossed. And both of your locations here in San Diego and Barrio Logan, right?
Yes, the two in San Diego are in Barrio Logan. They're not that far apart. They're about 4 blocks as the crow flies. And then we have our LA brewery in the city of Bell. And that's where we do a lot of production. It's a much larger brew house. It's about 7,000 square feet. And yeah, so we're excited. We think there's a lot ahead of us.
I love that authenticity that you bring, and just bringing in like the culture. It's very true. And I think that's partly why you guys have been so successful, is when you are that authentic business or person or family, you produce good stuff that you're proud of course you're going to be successful. So congrats to you guys. I am a huge fan of some of those beers that you already mentioned. And so I'm very excited about this dinner. I'm going to kind of break it down for everyone at home, just how to enjoy this meal. So you've either picked up your meal or you've had it delivered to your home. And so really sit down and take your time going through this meal. It's going to be a lot of food. Everything leaves our kitchen either warm or cool, depending on how you're supposed to enjoy it, including the beers. So the beers are going to show up cold. And so go ahead and stick the beers in the fridge. And then for this menu, you've got 4 courses. It's all served family style. All courses are served cold with the exception of the 3rd course. So the braised pork cheek is going to be warm. So if you want to go ahead and set your oven to about 200 degrees, you're just going to want to warm that up. Transfer the braised pork into an oven safe dish and then just keep that warm. So everything else can be stored in the fridge, and then the pork is going to be warm. So we'll kind of get into the reheating instructions as we go through the menu, but I just wanted to put that out there for anyone that is watching this video. And then we'll also put timestamps in the YouTube description below too. So you can look and see when we're talking about the 1st course, 2nd course, 3rd, and 4th. As you enjoy everything, go ahead and transfer it, like I said, into, a pretty plate. Sit down, crack open the beers one at a time, split the beers, pour it into a glass, and take a little sip and a little bite and really experience that. You're welcome to pause this YouTube video, and like I said, the timestamps will be included. let's see, anything else about reheating?
I'll get more descriptive about it once we get into the third course, which is the hot dish. So yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
And
I was going to say, I highly recommend, stopping and pausing the video between each course so that you really can, savor each meal or each course and the paired beer and not feel like you have to rush through to the second course to keep up with the video. We want this to be a dining experience, and so please take your time and really enjoy it at your own pace.
And also, there are no rules. You can do whatever you want. If you want to
do it all at once, that's fine too.
Totally. If you want to drink beer one with, the last course, you're the boss.
They're just suggestions.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, this is all fun. All right, so let's talk about that first beer. David, do you have beers with you? I know Paige has the Pepino Sour. Let's get into that Pepino Sour.
Pepino Sour. So that's this light body beer that we have here. This is a kettle sour. And, as I mentioned, we look to our culture and our own experience to inform our palate. And this was quite fun. Was inspired by a plate of cut up cucumbers with a bit of lime and salt, which was like my go-to watching TV. That was just a great snack to have. And with a little, sometimes we'll rim it with a little bit of chamoy and tajin to kind of provide that little bit of chili. And it is also a phenomenal base for making micheladas. So in the craft beer community, micheladas can be quite controversial, but in the Latino community, it's our go-to. I mean, we just love it. And this adds so much more flavor than a standard lager or a pilsner. That's why I think it really goes better with a michelada than anything else.
It's so interesting to, go for it.
I was going to say, can you give us the definition of a michelada?
Oh, a michelada
That's true.
Actually, that's a great question. There's two versions. There's what's called a chelada, which is a glass of ice, squeezed lime, salt, and your favorite beer. So the idea is to hydrate in a way, I call it, I may get criticized for this, but Mexican Gatorade. I mean, when I lived in Mexico and I was working out in the yard or whatever, and it was 110 degrees, but I can't just be chugging beers all day long. I'll have a chelada. And it's, because the ice dilutes, and it's just a great experience. Micheladas is, the Mexican palate is a lot more oriented to spices and tomato and lime and sometimes even cilantro. So there's a variety of micheladas, but it's like a beer Bloody Mary in a way. So it's a very similar spice set from a Bloody Mary mix. But again, ice, lime, and pepino sour. And in Mexico, it's huge. It's part of our culture. It's how we like to drink beer. And then, of course, as our palates get more sophisticated, we like to explore beer on its own terms. So we have a saying here at Border X: we never criticize anybody for their palate. Your beer journey is your own. You're going to start maybe with a michelada, but then you're going to be curious and you'll try, a Saison or a Stout or something, or an IPA. And so, we should never criticize anybody for what they like. We should always open doors into new palates, into new experiences. And so that's what this is.
David. That's right.
And so this is one of our best-selling beers. People love it just as it is, but also as a michelada. And I think it pairs, I believe, Carmine, that it's pairing with seafood, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we paired it with ají amarillo shrimp ceviche.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think it's going to be an awesome combination. It's a lighter beer, but it's got that tanginess from being a kettle sour, and then having the lime, the pepino there, which is a real crisp finish with a little bit of key lime in it. So complements perfectly, I think, fresh seafood.
Hold on. This is one of our cooks who frequents Border X, and Mujeres Brewer. She's there every weekend. So if you see her, kick her out. Every time I talk to her, she's like, "Oh, I was down in Barrio. I was at Border X.
I love how you can really taste the cucumber.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a really nice, soft flavor, but you can definitely tell that it's cucumber.
Exactly.
So is it just like the cucumber juice? Is that how you make it, or?
Correct. We actually start with boxes of fresh cucumber. We juice them and it gets added to the mix. So we don't use puree. It's actually fresh cucumber and key lime. So
Wow.
it's a great beer. It kind of keeps that essence. I remember when I first got it, I closed my eyes and it smelled like that plate of cut up cucumbers and key lime. And so that's, I think, what made it so perfect.
Fabulous.
I'm thirsty. Carmine.
I've actually tried this beer before. Very delicious, refreshing as well. And I know with the, you know, ingredients of cucumber, it would have just been easier to just make an aguachile to go along with this, which I know it's perfect with it. But we switched it up a bit. So with the ají amarillo, it's a Peruvian kind of an orange chili pepper. So you're going to get a little bit of that spice from that. So just your typical ceviche, marinade, limes. To sweeten it up, we did add a little bit of honey to it, but I think the refreshness of the cucumbers pairs well with the spice of the ají. It's A-J-I, ají, in case if some people thought that we had a misspell there. We did something different with this as well. We're doing our house-made rice crackers. So essentially we're just cooking some rice, just putting it through a food processor just to get it sticky, kind of like a mochi, spread it out on a sheet tray and then put it in the oven low and slow to get that nice homemade cracker. And then we're pairing it with pickled carrot and a radish salad on top, and then a little fennel fronds just to finish it off some color. But this would be just great on a hot summer's day. Unfortunately, we're not there yet.
So super excited about our second beer. We are featuring Blood Saison. As I mentioned in the introduction, that was actually our first home run. So as founders of the company, we were sitting around a table thinking about what the future held for us. And we made a critical decision. We said we wanted to make Mexican-inspired craft beer, but no one really knew what that meant. And so my nephew went off and two weeks later brought back this bright ruby red beer with this beautiful pink foam on it. And we didn't know what it was. He poured it out for us and we tasted it. And it was an epiphany for us. At that moment, we said, that's it. This is inspired by agua de Jamaica, a traditional hibiscus drink with agave or cactus sweetener. And it just exemplified exactly who we wanted to be as a brewery. And in fact, you know, lots of people loved it. We won a bronze medal at the San Diego International Beer Festival, gave us courage that we were on the right track. And I think it's going to pair very well with the meal that we have planned. The beer itself is, what you'll note first is that fruity kind of floral quality from the hibiscus flower with some tanginess because hibiscus is tangy. And then it kind of finishes on a clean agave, a little tad of sweetness. And a lot of people say that this beer is kind of almost wine-like qualities. And so I think when we think about the meal it's being paired with, I think you'll find that each one will uncover different characteristics of each part. And that's really what makes a great tasting, or is that complementary nature of the beer as well as the food.
My mouth got watery while you were explaining that.
I was going to ask a quick question about just the style, selecting the style to be a Saison. Like, was there some experimentation using different styles trying to achieve the Jamaica, or?
Well, you know, that's a great question, because that's kind of like the first thing we can think of, a Mexican flavor or ingredient or tradition, but then how do you pair it with the brew style? Because that's going to bring a whole different aspect. And for the Blood Saison, you know, when we thought about Saisons, you know, we thought about a lot of them are fruited, farmhouse, you know, it felt like that might be the right style. I've seen other breweries use hibiscus flowers with Hefeweizen or other beer styles, but it never seemed to hit the mark. And the one thing that makes us distinctive, and this is what I mean about brewing with our culture, is we grew up as kids drinking our mom or aunts or grandmother's agua de Jamaica. They would make it at home, and it would be super red and intense. That's where our palate is. That's what we grew up with. Other breweries would sprinkle a little bit, so it'd get pinkish, maybe a hue, but it would never be bright ruby red. So that was a very bold decision on our part, kind of unheard of, to put that much hibiscus into that beer to create that kind of experience. And we felt like the Saison style, because of kind of the fruited tradition, might complement it. And to be honest, we were just really lucky that it worked out so well.
Sometimes that happens.
We often are extremely lucky with some of our recipes. And to be the first one, and actually that went on to become our best seller for the first 3 years of our existence, and I think brought a lot of new fans to our brewery.
Great. Carmine, will you tell us what that's paired with?
Yes, we are serving a Wagyu Carpaccio. The beef is a Wagyu ribeye. For those who are not familiar with Wagyu, Wagyu is just Japanese cattle in essence. I'm not going to go into more of what they do over there in Japan, but typically the cattles are, there's a labor of love to raising cattle so that they can produce more fat. This one with ribeye being already kind of fatty, the Wagyu just has more marbleization through it. It's Carpaccio style, will be seared on the outside. So it will be cooked on the outside, but still rare in the inside, and then shaved thin. For those who have had Wagyu before, it's really the flavor of the fat. Though this is Carpaccio and it's served cold, I would highly recommend to let it sit at room temperature for a little bit, so that because of the fat, when it gets cold, it solidifies. And when you eat cold fat, it will just kind of coat your mouth and it will disrupt the flavors of the beer. By leaving it at room temperature, it will, all the flavors and with the pairing of the beer will just mesh well together. But this one, we are serving it with pomelo grapefruit. There's going to be a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of a bitter finish. Though the Jamaica will have a little tardiness to it, I think the pairing of the pea puree, which has a little bit of a sweetness to it, I think all of it works quite well together. We do have pickled kumquat on it, just to give a little bit of citrus and a little vinegar hit to it. But I think for the most part, with the Jamaica and a little bit of the agave nectar, I think you'll have flavors of the sweet, sour, tarty all together. And then again, with that ribeye, the Wagyu ribeye kind of just tones it down a little bit with that fat.
Yum.
Yeah, I was gonna say yummy.
Great.
And let's see, going into the third course, we have Abuelita's Chocolate Stout.
Yeah, the Abuelita's Chocolate Stout is really a great beer. Again, we use, for those of you familiar with the brand, there is a brand of chocolate sold in Mexico. It's a Mexican chocolate called Abuelitas. And although it has sugar, it tends to be more of a bitter chocolate. And growing up, and everyone shared the same experience. You would go into your kitchen, pull it out, and nibble on it as you're watching TV. I guess we had a lot of unusual food to watch or eat while we were watching TV. But it was a wonderful experience. And then when you actually made hot chocolate out of it, you would use a traditional frother and really mix it up. And it was wonderful. It's not a traditional, more of American style hot chocolate. It's because it's Mexican chocolate. It's a little more darker and bitter. But, again, that's our palate. That's what we grew up with, and that's what we love. And so we actually use those tablets. We grind them down, add them into the brewing process to kind of emulate that. And we don't always do that. I mean, sometimes we can be inspired by something, but it doesn't mean we put that into the beer. We just try to build a beer inspired by that flavor profile. In this case, which is the exception, we actually use the ingredient in it. And it's a wonderful, wonderful beer, rich, full body, not too sweet. A little bit of that bitterness comes through. And it's just really wonderful. And side note, it was actually served at a James Beard Award dinner 2 years ago in New York City. We had to send some cans out there. They actually served it in a little shot glass as a 12th course with a little pretzel ball filled with dark chocolate. So you
Who was
pop
the
the
chef
pretzel ball.
that did that dinner?
Oh, it was a woman from New York or Los Angeles. I can't recall her name.
Oh, wow.
But
That's
she
awesome.
was accepting the award, and she picked us for her 12th course, and
Awesome.
we were so proud to just be part of that. On a more humble reference point, I truly understood pairings one day when I was at the brew house in Otay Mesa, where we first started, and it was rainy, it was cold, no one was at the brewery, obviously because it was rainy and cold, and my my sister-in-law
Same
brought me
day.
some birria. I don't know if any of you have ever had birria, but it's hot, and this was real goat birria, so it was very gamey, spicy, hot soup, and I poured myself an Abuelita, a stout, and as I was tasting both of them, that's when I also had a revelation that now I understand pairings. It brought out flavors in each thing that by itself I never would have found. And so the contrast, the harmony, both of the things complement each other in a way that I never would have expected. But it kind of makes sense because in a way, someone mentioned, well, that's like mole. Mole is meat, spicy stew, but the beer is chocolate. And those are two of the key ingredients in a traditional mole. So I guess I was making a mole in my mouth. So I hope you enjoy. Can't wait to hear what we're pairing it with.
Yes, we are pairing it with the braised pork cheek. So again, I think any type of braising beer is always just a great pairing with it. So we did braise it with the Abuelita's chocolate stout. It's just going to bring more flavors out of pork. And then we're going to reduce a little bit of that braising liquid as a sauce. We are matching it with a crispy mascarpone polenta cake. So just real quick for heating instructions, I'd like to note that when you put it in the fridge immediately, it will, because the pork will be already shredded, but in case if it congeals a little bit because of some of the fat, when you do reheat it, just try to kind of shred them apart a little bit. And to keep up with the textures, I would highly suggest to remove the polenta cake. And rather than reheating it in your microwave or your oven, because of the moisture, it'll kind of make it soft and a little soggy. So I would highly recommend to pan fry it if you'd like to get textures in there. But with this, I think, again, with chocolate stouts or any type of stouts, there'll be a little bit of bitterness to it, but when you cook it, it just sweetens up a bit. And I think anything that's sweet with pork is always just warmth in my stomach. We're pairing it with pickled Fresnos. We have some grilled braised baby artichokes, some spring onions. And yeah, I'm excited to eat this one up, especially with the weather. I think it's going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I love that we use the abuelitas in the actual braising and in the pork cheek dish. I think that's going to be so yummy.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You guys are making me hungry. This doesn't have.
I know. No fair. I want to eat now.
You have to wait till Friday.
And then this leads us into the fourth course, which is the golden horchata stout, which is probably one of my favorite top 3 beers of all time. And I do consider myself a stout drinker. That is an incredible beer. Like, what a treat.
Yeah, thank you. And this is, again, another classic example of like looking to our culture and our experiences to inform our beer making. Horchata is a very traditional, probably one of the most popular agua frescas within the assortment of agua frescas. They drink it everywhere in Mexico. They drink it here in the United States. Most Mexican restaurants will have horchata. It's a traditional drink made with rice and cinnamon. In this case, we didn't add the rice. Really, we made a traditional stout with a heavy grain bill. So it's got a great body, very creamy. There's some lactose in there, so you'll kind of get that creaminess experience. That's this beer right here. And but then we really, what did we like about horchata? And we thought about it and we said, well, we want to put some vanilla notes in there. So we've got some Madagascar vanilla that we create in a tincture that's added later into the brewing process. And because it was already slightly sweet and now we've got the vanilla going on, we want to make sure there's a little bit of a contrast by adding cinnamon at the end. So cinnamon can be a traditional addition to your horchata as well. And what turned out is really this really well-balanced beer that is very creamy, easy to drink. The ABV is I believe 8.5, and so it's on the higher end. But it's just a delicious beer. I think that complements everything. And it is on a standalone basis. You know, we don't make anything out of this, Michelada. It is one of our top selling beers and did win a gold medal at the Los Angeles International Beer Festival. So we're quite proud of it. And again, it's just another example of how I think that fusion of our taste buds and our culture and our background combined with, you know, beer making techniques and traditions just, you know, create something that had never existed before.
I find it interesting that like on the nose, you don't get the vanilla and the cinnamon, but it's really in the mouth when you taste it. You know, you swallow and then you're like, oh, there's all that warmth, you know. Where...
Yep. I just tasted it and you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I think that's true of any great wine or any great beer or cocktails, that it gives you, you're on this little mini journey, right? The smell, the first taste, the residuals. I mean, any great beer will give you 2 or 3 experiences at least. I think we hit it.
Yeah,
again, great to be lucky.
You're on a good run.
Yeah.
And what are we pairing? Oh, sorry. What are we pairing it with?
The same thing.
Okay.
Give it.
We are pairing it with the citrus spice cake. We're doing individual cakes for everybody, or for each box. So you get 2. That will be served with poached golden raisins. We have some blood oranges in there, a citron buttercream. So there's this fruit called Buddha's hand, which gives you the citron flavor and scent of it. And then we are adding a little bit of lemon zest to it. I think with, you know, the sweetness and the creaminess, you know, a little citrus kind of helps kind of liven and freshen everything up. But the buttercream is going to be awesome. And then malted milk crumb on top. So you get a little bit of texture. If you're familiar with Ovaltine or anything, it kind of just, if you ever eat the powder by itself, it kind of just melts in your mouth. And then we make our own cajeta here at MIHO. So one thing with this cake I highly recommend is that let it sit at room temperature as well. You can still eat it cold, but I think when, you know, any type of cake, if you ever wonder why cakes always sit out on the, you know, dinner table, it's just best eaten at room temperature, you know? But I think with this pairing, because I've had this beer as well, it just perfect for it.
Yum.
Phenomenal. I can't believe you make your own cajeta. I really want to try it, because I actually misspoke a little bit. Sometimes we'll put a cajeta rim with cinnamon on it. So I'll have to get a sample from you. Yeah, it's you know, when I would take trips to Mexico, they would sell the cajeta at roadside stands and small vendors, and it would come in these little wooden containers and with a little spoon with it. And growing up, it was just phenomenal. I remember
by itself, or
just eat it by itself. It's just caramelized. I think they'd use goat milk, but they'd also use milk, a little bit sweetened. And yeah, it was funny. I when on one of my trips, I got lost in a village. I think I was only like 7 or 8. I got lost because I was looking for cajeta because I had some money. And yeah, I got lost in the crowd. There was a ton of people there for a religious festival, and you know, it's a memorable experience again.
Cool.
All for cajeta.
giving it all. Well, we do have a few questions for you that came from ticket guests. So the first question is, which beer do you enjoy brewing the most?
That's a great question. I'd probably say the horchata. It's just, it fills the brewery with such a beautiful smell. It's one of our best-selling beers. I think the science with the tinctures, you know, trying to use the best ingredients and extract the essence of it. And, you know, that's one of the things we want to be good at, because when you're inspired by something, you know, you got to figure out, well, what tools do I have at my disposal to try to create a flavor profile? And so I think the horchata is probably a great example of like really, you know, what I've told my brewers is we got to get really good at understanding these things. You know, almost in the culinary tradition, right? Because in the culinary tradition, I mean, you're always using different procedures, fermentation, you know, et cetera, to create different flavor profiles. And I think the horchata is a great example of that. So that's probably one of my favorites.
And what's your least favorite to brew?
Well, this is more on the business side of me. Is up in Bell, we have a 10-barrel brew house, and the Pepino is what's called the kettle sour. So you have to brew it and leave it there in your brew house for 2 to 3 days. So it ties up a lot of capacity. And then we have a 20-barrel fermenter. So now we're porting 10 barrels into a 20-barrel fermenter, which is a huge inefficiency, right? So we waste a lot of space, but it's one of our top sell. It is probably our top seller in gross volume. So
it's worth it.
It's worth it. We'll do it until we can figure out a better way.
The other question that we received was, which beer has a story that resonates the most with you?
Oh, good question. Ooh, okay. Hopefully I won't get emotional here. But the one that resonates the most, when we first started, probably within the first year, we gave my father hops to grow in his garden. He's an immigrant, came from Mexico, has an agricultural background. He planted in his backyard. You know, being a rural immigrant, you know, he has to have his own little farm back there. You know, so he grows corn, squash, everything. He's got a super green thumb. None of us were able to get the hops to grow, but he did. And it grew enough that we were actually able to harvest it at the end of the summer. And he also has a large fig tree. And that fig tree produces a huge amount of figs. He cuts them, dehydrates them in a little machine. And so we had the supply. And so we made this beer called Abuelo's Pale Ale. And it had the key ingredients where it was fresh hopped and or dry hopped. And then it had, we put in the dehydrated figs. So it was really like a collab with, you know, for my nephews, it's their grandfather. It was a collab with the grandfather. So that would, to me, was probably a meaningful one. He was so proud that, you know, things that he grew in his own yard became part of this beer. And so that one has a tremendous story. And I think kind of exemplifies the fact that we shouldn't forget that brewing and fermentation are really a community and familial thing, you know, that, you know, we've been doing it for as long as people have been around. We figured out how to brew and ferment things, you know, and it's a very democratic thing. It doesn't have to be a very kind of esoteric specialty thing. It's really belongs to all of us. I think it's a human right to be able to brew. So that one was very meaningful.
That's a beautiful story. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just loved how much you kind of told stories throughout the tasting too, and really appreciate that personal anecdote and just really sharing this time with us and everyone at home. So thank you so much for your time. It's been really nice chatting with you. And thank you, Carmine and Paige from the Guild, and then everyone at home for participating. I hope you enjoy.
Have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
I hope you enjoy it all.